Welcome! It is early May, it's like May 3rd, I think. If you're new here, my name is Dana, and under the name D.L. Pitchford, I publish unapologetically honest stories with real characters. And I'm going to be reading my own books in preparation for finishing the final book in this series. I have my book. This is old damaged copy. This is the copy that I go over and read. So I'm going to reread this, and then the second, and then the third, before I dive into rereading the draft I just finished. This is always such a bizarre experience, rereading this book, because this book is almost 10 years old. This came out in March 2017, which is crazy. I'm going to go through each of these and make a bunch of notes. I have a little notebook for keeping track of all of the things that I want to make sure I remember while I'm working on this final book, and all of the things that I might want to bring back in the final book. If there are any specific characters or moments that I really want to bring forward. And then I'm also going to be actually opening up the pocket that my husband got me for my birthday and figuring out how that works. So we'll probably transition to using this during this video at some point once I figure it out. Okay, the sky is insanely blue today. The wind is really nice, the temperature is perfect, everything is just so lovely out here. Since I'm reading and not doing something on my computer anymore, then it's not too difficult to actually do it outside. So I will be enjoying that and start reading my book and make some notes. I also ordered an SD card that should be here in a few days, and then I will be able to switch to using the pocket, and we'll see how that goes. When I reread these books in February, it was just like the most random thing. I was skim reading most of them because I know the story well enough. It was more a reminder and like going back and rereading all my favorite scenes. This will be very different because I'm going in with intention, and I'll be making notes. I'll be not necessarily analyzing, but assessing the situation, thinking about how all of the stuff in these books affects what is happening in the book I'm currently writing. This will be the first time that I'm genuinely analyzing them in a very long time. I've reread them a few times in the past couple years, but not so deeply, so this will be different. Okay, I just finished reading the first scene, and honestly, I forget how good this book actually is. I forget that I'm actually a good writer. Is that crazy? That feels crazy. This scene was actually one of the last scenes that I added to the book. In earlier versions, it started with the scene in the library where Billy is meeting Zane to tutor him for the first time, and that is the introduction. And I realized that is a terrible introduction to who Billy is and who she is around people that she's actually comfortable with. So in one of my final drafts, I went back and added this scene that's set like an hour beforehand. It is Billy and Jimmy hanging out and studying in his room, and then Xander gets back to the dorm room while they're studying. So it gives you the opportunity to see Billy while she's with her best friend, someone she genuinely cares about, and it introduces a lot of things that cannot be introduced in that scene with Zane. It brings in her sister, it brings in her antagonistic relationship with Xander, it brings in talking about her dad, who is a professor here at the college. That's why she attends college here. It talks about all of that stuff, but in a way that doesn't feel like it's just information that's getting shoved in your face. It's information that comes up in her conversation with Jimmy, and Xander is also there, inserting himself into the conversation, because that's what he does. There's also a lot of emphasis on her anxiety. I forgot that she gets like anxiety headaches. I don't think that's shown as much in books 2 and 3, which is probably more an oversight on my part than it is actual intention. There are also so many little moments, little things that are in the narration and in her conversation with Jimmy that just scream neurodivergent so bad. Even in this first scene, it is very obvious that the only legitimate friend that she has is Jimmy. She does not get along with her roommate. She doesn't get along with his roommate, and she obviously has no interest in knowing other people. There's just so much good character information in this first scene. It's such a solid first scene. I am still very happy with it. One other thing this scene does right at the end here is it pretty well establishes that Xander has feelings for her and she is not aware of it, but Jimmy is. Also, the more I'm reading this, the more I'm realizing Jimmy is probably also autistic. It's pretty heavily established that before college, at least, he never had another friend as close as Billy. Xander is his first friend where he's as close with them as he is with Billy. And to be fair, Jimmy is Xander's first best friend. He never had that growing up either. I love it when it's a group of people who don't fit anywhere else and they just become friends, because that's the kind of friends I always had growing up. Me and all of my best friends, we were the weirdos and we relished being weirdos. So I love that group dynamic. I love having these people that don't fit anywhere else coming together and finding a home together. That's like one of my favorite things. And you know, that is to an extent a found family trope, but it is a very specific one. And you know, what did I realize now as an adult? That me and my group of weirdos growing up, what I know now is that actually we were all queer and we were all neurodivergent, and we just weren't aware of that when we became friends in high school and before middle and high school. And that's exactly the type of dynamic that I like to have in my stories. Being weird and different is good, actually. And comparing this scene as a first scene to the next scene where Billy is meeting someone she doesn't know for the first time, having the scene with Zane be the first scene just doesn't work very well because it doesn't show Billy in the best light, in her best light. She is antisocial and closed off on a good day. When she is anxious about something and meeting someone for the first time and trying to be professional while also trying to be nice, she's masking so hard in this scene. But instead of making her seem more personable, it makes her seem more cold. And that's just not a great great way to open with your main character. So I'm very glad that I added this other scene. It does exactly what I want it to do. It makes her feel more human. But no matter what, I have like a million reviews and comments and whatever of people going, Billy's not likable. She's so cold and mean and judgmental. I'm like, yeah, she is. That's kind of the point. I definitely get anxious about this book not being as good as I remember it being because it's been almost 10 years since I published it. And I remember when I reread it in February, there were definitely scenes throughout all of the books that stood out as being something that could use some line edits. But this book is good. I'm a good writer, actually. I've read through the first 2 chapters now, which is not a lot. This has, I believe it's like 37 chapters? 38. This has 38 chapters, so 2 chapters in is not much at all. There are descriptions throughout, obviously, of the different people, but most of that stuff gets concentrated near the beginning so that it's established early on. So I've got notes of the descriptions that are used for the different characters, some more than others. Like Imogene has only been on the phone so far, her sister, so all that I have of that is that she typically has a bubbly tone of voice. That's the extent of the description I have for her so far. She's been in 1 scene and it was over the phone. So there isn't a lot of opportunity there for physical descriptions. And of course there isn't a lot of opportunity with Billy because it's first person. She's not talking about her hair and whatever. So right now I've only written down the things that have been literally in the book. I know there's a lot of other stuff, like she has freckles, that hasn't been mentioned. I'm also generally making note of, like, Xander has his leather jacket that he wears almost all the time. He also wears a watch. But yeah, at this point, I am just keeping track of the very specific terms that I use for each character's descriptions. Like for Zane, it wasn't just that he has black hair, it was specifically jet black hair. Like the exact wording is important. So obviously I don't have a lot of information for Billy yet. So for Billy, I have auburn corkscrew curls. I've also described her hair as coiled. And then she wears thick-rimmed glasses. No color specification, partially because you wear glasses. These colors, you can't see them from your perspective. They're not there. There's just a blurry edge. And then I also wrote down that she has like anxiety-related headaches and nausea, which is something that has specifically gotten better as her mental health and self-care practices have improved throughout the books, and like taking antidepressants and stuff like that. But she is also dealing with a lot of anxiety around meeting Xander's parents and all of that stuff. So I think that is something I want to make sure I bring into the 4th book at the moments where it is appropriate. So a lot of good information in here. Another thing I'm looking for while doing this is I specifically want to do a video where I'm comparing my first draft to the final draft. So there are a couple scenes where I'm like, oh, would that be a good one for that video? I don't know. I need to find the original versions to compare. I'm going to take a break from this for now. I have family in town right now and it is messing up my schedule and making things take longer, and I'm not pleased about that, but that's how it goes sometimes. So I will check in later. Okay, well, if the grackles next door decide to actually be quiet for more than 2 seconds, I can record a short clip. Fingers crossed. I'm not sure how long it's been. I've been reading the book steadily when I can fit it in. I'm probably just under a third of the way through it at this point. I made it through the first plot point. Billy had a huge fight with her dad, which it didn't really feel like a fight because she was on the verge of a panic attack and then lashes out at him. He basically tells her that, if that's how you really feel, then you shouldn't be here. And that hits her very hard. Even though that's what she invited him to do, she's not in a good place. And her poor dad is not able to articulate himself very well. They don't know how to talk to each other at this point in the story, and it makes me sad. Anyway, I'm like 100 pages in. I've gotten a lot of good information specifically on the way her dad's house is set up. These are my notes on his house specifically, and they continue onto the other side, and this is a bad map, I need to redraw it. In fact, I did redraw it and it still wasn't right. I either need to get much better at drawing smaller, because this is a mess, or get bigger paper, because I can't seem to draw it how I need it to be. I've written down a few other things, because we're actually seeing Imogene in person now, but the descriptions of her have been so minimal so far. Just that she has dark blonde hair and bright eyes. It's not even a color. It's more a reference to her general attitude and demeanor. I have a few more notes about Xander too, like how he gets a crinkle between his eyebrows when he's irritated, which is funny because the scene where that is specifically brought up is a scene where you don't even see his face because Billy is hiding under her covers so that they think she's asleep. And she is very cognizant of what his irritated face looks like. And in that moment, she is thinking about him in a way that isn't typical because his behavior in that moment is atypical to what she knows of him. That's really the first moment where Billy realizes that maybe Xander isn't the same person that she thinks he is. Maybe there's more depth to him, and maybe he's not just a smug rich boy who can get whatever he wants and doesn't care about anyone else. I've got some good descriptions of her dad, a little bit of her mom. Her mom's only been in like 2 scenes, and I'm slowly listing off all the different campus buildings. I don't think I'm even a third of the way through it. I am at the start of chapter 11. Billy is home for the holidays with her mom and her sister. Her mom is sober for the first time in years, basically, and actually doing quite well mental health wise. So it was very jarring for her to come back and realize that her mom's behavior is totally different than what she has been used to for most of her life. And Billy and her sister Imogene are going over to Jimmy's house because Jimmy is their next door neighbor. That's how they became friends. And Jimmy has brought Xander home for the holidays because Xander did not want to go to his home. And Billy's just kind of like, that's weird. She has no idea why. She has no real indication of things going on behind the scenes because Xander acts like nothing is wrong ever. So we've got a few more chapters here over winter break, and then it's back to Bradford for the spring semester. And we get to the midpoint pretty soon after that. The midpoint is one of my favorite parts of this book. It's the first spicy scene in the whole series, and it's so much fun. Because it's not even about the spice, it's about the interactions before and during, and how it changes Billy and Xander's entire dynamic, because she doesn't know how to interact with him afterward. So I'm at the beginning of chapter 11, and the midpoint is chapters 17 and 18. Little ways to go. The audio on this will probably be crappy, because I can't get up to use the mic because I have a cat on my lap. But I just finished reading the midpoint. I love that scene so much. It is one of my favorite scenes. I love Billy and Xander so much. Even when he's such a jerk to her, he's also incredibly affectionate and caring, and she just is so very unaware of it. At this point, basically, everyone knows that he likes her, except her. And so there are moments like she makes a comment about, but you hate me, why would you do this? And he's just like, he just gives her this look and laughs, and it's like, yeah, sure, I do. I don't know, I'm just having a lot of emotions. I love this book so much, and I'm still so proud of it. And I love these characters. Xander loves Billy so much, and she is so clueless. So I read that chapter, plus, a whole bunch leading up to it, but I was listening to Shimmer by Fuel on repeat for that chapter specifically, because that's the song in my playlist that is specific to this scene. A lot of the songs on my playlist are not specific moments, but like a vibe, but then there's stuff like that song, where it is this scene that is what the song relates to. So yeah, just listening to that on repeat while reading this and just feeling a lot of emotions right now. This book is really good, actually. That's crazy. I'm pretty girl. Two caddies. It is Thursday night. This is someday in May. I don't remember. I went to this really cool presentation at the library tonight. Got a couple books about the history of the Ozarks. Brooks Blevins is a teacher at MSU, and so he did a presentation there. He talked about like the mythology of the Ozarks. So he talked about some cryptids, he talked about like local legends and general folklore. So I bought the 2 books that he had available. He signed them for me, which is always so fun. And then I also spent most of the day reading. I am a decent way through now. It's so interesting because I literally just reread these books like 2.5 months ago. And this is just such a different experience because I'm looking at it from an analytical perspective. I am taking notes, in some parts pretty extensive at this point. But it's also because I now have a completed draft of book 4 that is actually like pretty solid as opposed to the mess that it was before. While reading this book, I've been thinking so much about what state Xander is in during this book because he comes across, in this book especially, like he has everything together. He is confident, he's smart, but he doesn't try. He's kind of a jerk to her, but he obviously does care about her. And he just puts up this front like nothing is ever wrong. Like he has no real inner turmoil. He has no real issues that are his issues. But then you get to book 4 and you go, oh shit, you were faking it this entire time. This book, this is their freshman year of college. It is the first time that he is like genuinely away from his family ever. He acts like nothing is ever really genuinely wrong, but there's so much going on under the surface. There's so much that Billy is unaware of because she doesn't try to become aware. She doesn't put in any effort to consider his perspective or to consider the things that happen outside of when she is present. And that's stuff that she slowly learns throughout this book and the next book. She's discovering so much about him, but there's also so much stuff that she doesn't know and she doesn't have the chance to know because he just straight up keeps it a secret. He keeps it hidden. There's so much he keeps from her. There's so much he keeps from Jimmy, who is their mutual best friend, and the first like real genuine best friend that Xander has ever had. So much of who he is in this book is a facade. It's him pretending everything's okay. Like, it's still him. He's not being fake, but he isn't sharing all of himself with even the people that he cares about. So much of this book is Billy figuring out that there's more to him than she thinks there is, that he's not the selfish, egotistical playboy that she thinks he is, but even by the time they're friends, there's still so much of himself that he's holding back. He makes so many tiny lore drops in this that are like unintentional bombshells, and he just says them like they don't mean anything. And even what little that you do know about his parents at this time, it's that they're constantly on business trips. They are not home. There's obviously emotional neglect, if nothing else, but Billy severely underestimates how terrible it is, and she doesn't realize that until book 4, and that's, kind of the point. Anytime somebody asks him a question about his parents, he doesn't answer the question. He sidesteps it and says something that is related, but not actually an answer. Xander drives Billy to the airport in Burlington to pick up her sister Imogene because she's coming to hang out over spring break. And Imogene specifically asks him, why don't you ever go home? And he doesn't answer the question. So yeah, I'm thinking a lot about where he's at emotionally in this book. because it's not a good place. It is, in fact, a very bad place, but you would not guess that based on his behavior in this book. And even that's not the whole truth, because it's like emotionally he's in both a good place and a bad place, because he has a best friend. He's never had one of those before. He's never been close to anyone like this. He's never been in love before. He's never felt this kind of freedom. He has never had the opportunities that he has now. But there's also a certain amount of grief that comes with that he is not dealing with. He is still not dealing with it all the way into book 4, and that's kind of his emotional arc in that book, is he has to deal with actually getting closure with his parents. He has to grieve his childhood and move on. So this first winter break, he goes home with Jimmy and meets Jimmy's parents. The book does not at all touch on how big of a deal that would be for him, because Billy and Xander are not even remotely friends at that point. They barely tolerate each other, and Billy really doesn't think much of him at all at the time. She sees Xander there and she goes, why is he in my space? Why is he intruding on my home and on my best friend's home? And like, I already have to deal with him so much at school because they live together there, and now Jimmy brought him here. Why would he do that? Why is he ruining this for me? Because she already doesn't want to be home either. And she, you know, has a whole host of issues because she had a huge fight with her dad and she's freaking out about that. And her mom is sober for the first time in a very long time, and that is a jarring experience, even if it's a good thing. And so she has all of these other things going on. She does not care that Xander is there. She hates that he's there because he is making everything worse in her eyes. And it's just an annoyance that he showed up there and that Jimmy didn't tell her that he was bringing him. But this moment to Xander would be huge. Jimmy's parents, Charlie and Thea, immediately adore Xander, and they are more than happy to take in another stray because that's kind of what they did with Billy. They probably have a pretty good idea of his home life because Jimmy has suspicions, but nothing actually confirmed, and Jimmy is really close with his parents. He would be sharing that information, even if he's not talking to Billy about it. And having two affectionate and openly loving parental figures who are both a strong couple together and very willing to be a parent is exactly what Xander needs. And none of that comes through in this, because this is all Billy's perspective and she doesn't care about any of that. In fact, she's just so thoroughly frustrated that everyone loves Xander when she does not like him. And even Billy's dad is like, hey, your friend Xander really cares about you. And Billy's just like, what are you talking about? No, he doesn't. Literally everyone can tell that Xander has feelings for her except Billy. She is the only one who is so thoroughly unaware. And like, Jimmy makes little comments and Imogene makes little comments and Billy's just like, what are you hinting at? If you don't come out and say it, I don't understand. And they don't actually come out and say it, so she doesn't understand. But yeah, where I'm at, it is spring break. Imogene is visiting and she and Billy are staying at their dad's house. This is the first time Imogene is seeing him in like 3.5 years. And Billy is freaking out, but she's really trying, and she is immediately jealous of how easy it is for Imogene and her dad to reconnect because they don't have any problems. They are immediately okay and affectionate, and Billy doesn't know how to be that. She doesn't know how to be okay or affectionate with even her friends most of the time, let alone with her dad, who she idolized and felt so horribly abandoned by when the divorce happened. But it's the fact that they were so close that makes that harder. One of the chapters I read earlier today made me cry. It's just Billy being in the bedroom at her dad's house and not really knowing how to fit in or how to interact with him. And he has a photograph of the two of them from like 6 or 7 years ago, and is just sitting in the bedroom that she's staying in there. And she doesn't know if he specifically put it out because she was staying in there, or if he just has it there all the time, and which version of that is better. And she also has this letter that she wrote to him but never sent. She found it while she was going through stuff in her house over Christmas break. And she and her dad used to write codes to each other, like cryptography stuff. And she wrote a letter to him, and it's really sad, and I cried. But I got to read what I'm pretty sure are my 2 favorite scenes in the book today, which was the midpoint, which is a very big turning point in Billy and Xander's relationship, because, you know, it's the point where the tension between them comes to a head. And it is a scene that I very specifically call back to in the 4th book. There was a scene about 3/4 of the way through book 4 where I wrote it, and it didn't start out as intentional. It just kind of, when I wrote it, it just came naturally that, oh, I'm making a bunch of callbacks to this scene. Let's pull up that scene and find some of the specific wording that I used in this moment where Billy asks Xander to sleep with her, but use that wording in a very different scene. I don't know who, if anyone, will pick up on those very specific callbacks, but they're there, and I know they're there, and it makes me very happy. And then my other favorite scene is at the start of spring break. So Billy goes and hangs out with Zane, who's been mad at her lately, and that doesn't go very well, but things get interrupted. Xander calls her. You know, she doesn't typically respond to Xander. So when he calls and says, hey, we got really drunk. Jimmy's really drunk, and he's never been drunk before. Can you come and drive us back to campus? Not that he says it in a nice way. He's drunk and at a party. He's not being nice. Obviously, she uses that as an excuse to leave because she really wanted to get out of there but didn't know how to do that. And what do you know, when she gets to the party to pick them up and Jimmy is trashed and like throwing up, and Xander is so excited to see her and is not at all restraining himself in showing that, and she's just so confused. Anyway, so the scene after they get back to the dorms, she helps put Jimmy to bed, and then there's just a very drunk Xander who is weirdly affectionate and like asking her to stay and like spend time with him, talk to him, and she's just like, you're acting so weird right now. And she stays, and they talk and they flirt and they argue and they drink more, and that's not very smart. And this is another one of those scenes where Xander is acting completely contrary to what she thinks of him, and it is so confusing to her. And a moment that, in retrospect, it's very obvious that he has feelings for her, but she's just so thoroughly unaware and unwilling to examine that at this point in time that it does not even occur to her. Anyway, I love that scene so much. Xander is so in love with her, and she has no idea. I just really love all these little moments with Billy and Xander, but she is so oblivious. Anyway, I'm on page 262. And I will probably finish reading this tomorrow. I have a lot of thoughts about what's going on behind the scenes in this, all of the things that Billy is missing, that she is unaware of, or that people outright don't tell her is happening. And it's really interesting to think about that because I have several short stories that are written or partially written from Xander's perspective that take place during this book. And those are where that sort of stuff would be explored. I have not updated one of those short stories in a while, but now that I have a decent draft of book 4, I think it would be a good time to go back and work on some of those, because now I have a better understanding of what he would be feeling during this first book, even if he is in denial of those feelings in regards to like his family and his past and his trauma. He is very much pretending that none of that bothers him when obviously it does. house. And none of the short stories that I have worked on have been specifically set during winter break when he first goes to Jimmy's house. But there really should be one, because that would be a huge moment for him and doesn't actually have to do with Billy. Most of the stuff I've written is like behind the scenes, him realizing his feelings, admitting his feelings, and like interactions with Jimmy going, hey, you know, if you weren't such a jerk to her, she might actually be interested. So yeah, I'm gonna get ready for bed and read some more, hopefully get in a couple more chapters. Okay, I got my micro SD card in the mail today, so we are officially using the Pocket. I don't have the mic on right now because it needs to charge, but everything else is good to use, and the built-in mic seems honestly pretty good. I just finished my book. I cried at least one more time. No, the scene in the car with her dad where they finally talk, and I just really, really love it. It is so special and important to me. And these characters, I love them. I love Billy's dad so much. He's just like the sweetest man you could possibly meet. But he's so awkward. She gets it from somewhere. If Billy is autistic, her dad is so autistic. It's painfully so. My notes are a little excessive. Half a page for each of them was not enough. Descriptions for Jimmy and like especially Prudence, who is only in a few scenes in this book, definitely did not need that much. Wrote down a few notes about Jimmy's parents in the little bit that they're in. Not very much about Imogene. A whole freaking lot about Zane. Lots of descriptions about her dad, and a tiny, tiny bit about her mom. And I know I want to include her honors professor in book 4. He's not currently in it, but he should be because it's her senior year and she needs to be working on honor stuff. So I wrote down some notes about him. He's only in this first book, but he's also friends with her dad, so it's honestly weird that he's not in the books more. I have a whole list of all of my campus buildings, the very few off-campus buildings that are actually mentioned. I have so many descriptions of her dad's house, which is really important because it's one of the locations that is always included. Going to her dad's house for tea and for dinner is such a huge part of Billy's life in college. I need to make sure that I am, referencing the right things. This was my first attempt at a map. It is not big enough. Here's my next one. I need to do another because even this doesn't have stuff, and I'll probably put together a better map than this and then continue to make updates to it as I read books 2 and 3, because there are a lot of locations that aren't even in this book yet. And I did a few different versions of a floor plan for her dad's house, and none of them are right, so I need to do that again. I need to figure out what exactly it's supposed to look like, because this one is very wrong. As far as things that I want to call back to reference, there was only one thing that stood out as something I want to specifically reference somewhere. Most of the stuff that I know I want to reference, I already did reference in book 4, but there's this moment on page 324. And this is with Billy and Xander. As it is, I have to spend all weekend working on this. It's due in 2 weeks and I've been procrastinating. I could really use your help, Xander. Halfway out of the parking spot, he steps on the brake and flashes me a grin. Is that a fact? You flatter me. He twists the wheel and backs the rest of the way out. You know I'm going to remind you of this moment for the rest of your life, right? Oh God, I turn to look out the window. I'm going to have to deal with you that long? And yet, he has not been reminding her of this moment where she asked for his help at all. Probably because it's no longer a strange thing for her to ask for his help. And even this isn't the first time that she asks for his help, but it is the first time that she actually says those words. Probably the main other thing that stood out to me is that even by the end of this book, Xander is such a wife guy. Like, they're not even dating, and he's so proud of her and supportive. No, when she's telling her dad about how she wants to switch majors to major in art instead of math, which is very difficult for her to admit because math is how she and her dad were connected growing up, and it's such a big part of their relationship, and it feels like she is abandoning him by doing that, which is ridiculous, but that's how it feels. So there's this moment where they're talking about it and she's finally telling him about this, and his response is basically, I'm not really surprised. I've seen you with your art supplies even if I haven't seen the actual art, and apparently you're really good at it. And Billy's just kind of like, who told you that? She assumes it was her sister. Imogen is one of the few people who is allowed to see her artwork. So she's like, did Imogen tell you? And his response is, no, Xander told me. And it's just like, he's so proud of her and like impressed by her. He just loves her so much. I really love this book. I'm really proud of this book. And it is really nice to reread it and realize that if I were working on this now, there isn't a whole lot that I would change. Even almost 10 years later, this is honestly a really solid book, especially since it was the first one that I revised to completion, and these characters are so close to my heart. And there's so much of myself, of my soul that is in these books. And it's also been really fun to listen to my playlist while I'm doing this. The scene with her dad in the car, while I was reading it, I'm listening to the playlist, and the song that goes with that scene came on, so it was perfect. So I got a lot of really good information from rereading this. I'm going to make a list of all of the descriptions that I used for the characters, and I need to write up all of my notes of that stuff, and also draw a bigger map of campus, and then I can add more information to it when I reread books 2 and 3. As the series goes on campus locations become less important. I am done with this book, at least for the most part. I will probably start reading book 2 tomorrow. I'm a little anxious because book 2 is really sad. I don't want to be sad. This book already made me cry. Okay, I'm still working out the kinks on the Pocket, so right now I'm using my phone again. I've recorded a couple clips with it, and I think it's gone well. But yeah, we're figuring things out. I started book 2 this morning. I am anxious to read this book in particular because it is sad. And when I read it in February, I was on my period and very emotional, and I was distraught from reading this book. So I'm anxious, but also I know how it ends. It's not a surprise. And the third book happens and things get better and it's okay. I read the first 3 chapters this morning, which introduces a couple new characters, the main ones being Dahlia and Brent. There's also Darius, who has technically been in scenes but hasn't really said anything yet, and he is Dahlia's twin. These are all people in the grade above Billy, so they're juniors this year. Billy knows Dahlia because they have some art classes together, and also they got put in the same housing unit because Billy didn't have anyone particular to room with, so she got shoved in with other people. She got put in where they could fit her, basically. So she knows Dahlia, but they're not really friends, they're acquaintances, and then they become friends at the start of this book. This book starts at Halloween. And by extension, she then becomes friends with Brent and Darius, and there are several other people that aren't really important, but they're there. They have a rather large friend group, but Billy really just becomes friends with Dahlia and Brent. And kind of Darius, not even Darius all that much. At this point, things with Jimmy and Xander are mostly good. Billy and Xander are still like arguing regularly. They have kind of a spat in chapter 2, so they're not really talking right now, but that typically doesn't last very long. And Jimmy's just like, guys, why am I always caught in the middle of this? And then Billy is also in the process of becoming better friends with Prudence. They're like actually friends at this point. Meanwhile, in the first book, they were really only ever acquaintances. Prudence was just one of the girls that Billy shared her bathroom with. They didn't have the same room, but they had adjoining rooms and they had a mutual bathroom. But Prudence is also an art major, so now that Billy is taking art classes, they are spending more time together because they're generally in a lot of classes. They're in drawing class together in this, and Dahlia is also in there. So that creates some immediate issues because Dahlia is just this force of nature who, when she decides she wants to be friends with Billy, Billy doesn't really have a choice. And she just like hijacks everything and forces her way into stuff. A lot of this book is about toxic friendship, but also Billy's mom is getting remarried, and so they're trying to plan the wedding, and Billy is like, I'm literally halfway across the country. What do you want me to contribute to this? I can't do anything. The wedding is set to happen over spring break because that's when she can be there. But aside from Thanksgiving break, which is really short, and winter break, which is, basically a month long, she doesn't have any time that she can actually go there and be there in person to help out with all of the wedding stuff that her mom wants to do right this time. Like, if that's what her mom wants, fine, but there's only so much Billy can actually do to help with that, especially when she's not emotionally invested in this at all. Even though her mom is not physically there for most of the book, the main storyline revolves around Billy's relationship with her mother and how that influences her relationships with other women, so that, affects her relationships with Dahlia, with Prudence, with Imogene. But Billy is really wrestling with the fact that for basically all of her childhood, her mother had alcohol abuse problems and is just generally mentally unstable. She is bipolar and was not on any type of medication, not getting any therapy, not doing anything to make the situation better. She was basically self-medicating with alcohol, and that made everything worse. But then Billy goes away to college, and when she comes back for winter break in the first book, her mom is sober for the first time. Her mom is taking medication, she's doing stuff. She starts seeing someone by the end of that book. Basically, Billy went away to college and her mom became a completely different person, and she doesn't know how to handle that. So that influences a lot of things. I'm so glad that stuff with her dad is good now. They sorted things out in the first book and they don't really have any issues at all in the rest of the series. He is once again this strong, comforting, kind figure for her. He is supportive, endlessly supportive of her. He's so proud of her and so happy to be able to spend time with her again. And Billy really needs that because everything else, especially in this book, everything else is falling apart. So I have a few more characters that I have started taking notes on. I've also made a few more notes about Xander specifically. The week before campus housing opened up, Xander got into town early and was living out of his car while job searching. He wanted some sort of job off campus so that he still had it during breaks and he didn't have to go home again. He never really gave anyone an explanation for why he was there a week early, why he was living out of his car. He just kind of did it and acted like it was fine and everything is fine because that's what he does. And Billy definitely did not know about this beforehand because she was, at least during some of that time, staying with her dad. If there's room at her dad's house, she would be like, what the hell are you doing? Come sleep in a bed. We have those. So there's no real explanation for why exactly he got there so much earlier than housing opened. And that's definitely something I want to address in book 4. A few other campus buildings have been mentioned. The art building actually has a name now. It's the Kelly Center for Fine Arts. And of course, Draft Horse now exists. That is one of the bars downtown. It's where Xander got a job. At this point, he's just a server, but he actually starts bartending here pretty quick. He spent most of the first book screwing around, doing a lot of partying and drinking, and still managing to ace all of his classes, but very much in a rebellious stage. And now he is very serious about being on his own. He is working constantly and making really good tips because he's very personable. He is charismatic. But anyway, I am 3 chapters in. I imagine I will probably go through this book and the 3rd book much faster purely because I want to get past all of the sad, depressing stuff and get to Billy and Xander actually being together. So, yeah. I have made it to the first plot point, and this is the book that makes me cringe the most. And it's not because the writing is bad, it's because Billy spends most of the book self-sabotaging everything, and I know it will get better, and I know she will get better, but it is physically painful. This is probably the book where she's the biggest mess, and it just hurts my heart to read it. I am, like, in pain. This book, it fluctuates a lot between things going okay and things being a disaster. And right now, these couple chapters are a huge disaster, and then it kind of gets better, and then it gets worse again, and you know, that's how it goes. But at least now that I'm reading book 2, I have a new playlist to listen to, so I'm enjoying listening to the music. It's just that all of the music for this book is so angsty. I love it, but it is physically painful to read. Back to it! Okay, just a quick little update. I managed to make it through the first plot point. It was hard. That one scene where she and Jimmy are so drunk and they're arguing so publicly, it's unbearable. And then Xander kicks everyone out and sends her to bed, and it's more manageable after that. I don't know why that specific scene in particular is so hard for me to read, but I was just like in physical pain reading it. I'm much farther now. I'm getting close to halfway, and I am really excited about the halfway point because the midpoint is really good. Billy and Xander get to actually have a really nice, soft moment, which they haven't had much of in this book because they've been fighting for most of the book. Right now, it is winter break. Christmas just happened. She got to spend Christmas with her dad, which is really nice because that's like what she tried to do in the first book and everything fell apart and she freaked out. And now they're actually able to do that. And all the scenes with her dad are so good. I love him so much. He's such a good dad. He's just doing his best and trying to make sure that she does her best too. I love him. Anyway, I mostly wanted to check in because I had this realization not too long ago. I was thinking about how these books function together, how they work as a series, and it came to me that, the first book can mostly stand on its own. It is like a complete story. There doesn't need to be more. But books 2 and 3 are so intertwined. You can't read book 2 and then just be like, okay, yeah, we can end this here. You can't. It doesn't work like that. There's still so much more to that story. And so book 3 kind of gives you the conclusion to the story arc that starts in book 2. And I know this isn't like a weird thing. This is very typical for a lot of series, especially trilogies. Often the first one can stand on its own, but the second and third are really interconnected. But now I'm working on this 4th book and I'm realizing that the book it is most connected to is actually book 1. So it basically goes book 1 functions mostly on its own and then books 2 and 3 are together and book 4 kind of brings us full circle. And so a lot of the things that I'm referencing in book 4 are actually callbacks mostly to book 1 and not as much to the other ones. And I'm almost halfway through book 2 and nothing has really stood out to me as something that I should definitely be bringing up, something that I should be referencing. There have been a couple things, but they're mostly things that I was intending to reference at the time that I wrote this book. Like they play Never Have I Ever at the party at the first plot point, and it comes out that Xander has been arrested. That is something that even at the time I wrote this book, I planned for you to learn about that all the way in book 4. Because at the time that comes up, there's no explanation, there's no details, there's no nothing. He gives no information. And Billy is too drunk and too mad at him to even ask about it. So there are a few little things like that, but nothing big that I know I need to call back to in book 4. Anyway, I need to go fold some laundry now, and then I will probably be reading some more because I am so anxious to be reading this book. I have not made nearly as many notes as I did from the first book, but a lot of that is because I already have most descriptions written down. I'm only writing down things that are different, so there isn't nearly as much to write down. Anyway, to the laundry. Okay, I am pretty fresh out of the shower, but I wanted to check in. I am just shy of 3/4 of the way through book 2, which is crazy. I'm reading this one so much faster than I read book 1. I knew that would happen though, like genuinely I knew it would. I would generally consider book 1 to be slow-paced, but the rest of these, not so much. And after the midpoint, Billy really does start to be in a better place, like emotionally. She and Xander are talking again, which is always nice because he is my favorite. It's weird, but I forgot how much of what happens in this book is related to Billy dealing, or rather not dealing, with the things that happened in the first book. The last quarter of book 1 was a very hard time for her. She was dealing with a lot emotionally, even though by the end of the book she's doing a lot better. It's still not okay. She's still not okay. And that really shows in this book, which is good. I'm very happy with how I handled a lot of that stuff. But it also tells me there is still a lot of stuff from book 1 that she needs to resolve emotionally, even though she kind of thinks she already has. Which is good because that's a lot of what's happening in book 4. Probably what stands out to me the most in this book, though, is how she really thinks that Xander is doing well. She thinks that he has everything together. And a lot of that is the persona that he puts on for the world. It's just very interesting because she can tell the difference between the, snarky, smug, conceited version that most of the people see and the softer, kinder version that she's able to see, but she doesn't put together that there's still so much he's keeping secret. She really does think that he is way more mentally stable than he actually is. And he has anger issues in all of the books. It becomes much more apparent in this book because they're fighting a lot. And the way they fight in this book is much more serious than all of the fighting that happened through the first 3/4 of book 1. Because at this point, they're actually friends, so them fighting matters. Their fighting in most of book 1 didn't matter because she barely tolerated him, so they were always fighting, and it wasn't, like, serious most of the time. So they have a couple really big fights in this one, and it makes me very sad, but they're at a good place right now. They've made up. Another thing that stood out to me was one of the scenes that I read earlier today. They go to check out a house because Billy and Xander and Jimmy are planning to rent a house off campus starting in summer. So they go to look at this place and they're talking about stuff, and Billy is kind of silently freaking out because she's worried about what happens when she and Xander get into another fight, or what happens if they start seeing other people, because they're not together, but they both know that they have feelings for each other, and she is the one who's going, I can't handle a relationship right now. I cannot handle trying to take care of a relationship when I can't even take care of myself. And he's just kind of like, I don't mind helping take care of you. So anyway, they're talking while Jimmy is talking to the landlord, and Xander is basically like, if we don't choose a place, that's fine, but I'm not going back. I'll get an apartment by myself. If you guys can't do this, I will figure something out. I will live out of my car if I have to. I am not going back. And Billy's response is, you won't have to. Like, I won't let that happen. But in the draft of book 4 that I have, I'm fairly certain that she is the one who is like, hey, we should go visit your parents. And for her to go from, you won't have to go back there ever again, to, hey, take me to meet your parents, is crazy. Yes, there's like a 1.5 years in between there, but it's also a 1.5 years of her actually learning more about his home life and learning not the details or anything like that, because he still keeps so much of that close to the chest, but it's learning more about how much it affected him. He tries to hide it, but when you live with someone, for instance, you do learn those sort of things, whether the person is trying to hide it or not. And then, you know, once they're in a relationship, he does open up more about those sort of things, just not fully. And a lot of book 4 is about Xander finally being able to open up about those things. He, at that point, basically knows everything about how awful her childhood was, but he hasn't fully shared that with her. So book 4 is kind of her chance to help take care of him, but also, like, they're taking care of each other. Anyway, so I think I need to make some sort of adjustment there, because it feels out of character for her to be the one to be like, hey, you know how I said you would never have to go see your parents again? Just kidding, let's go. She wouldn't do that to him. She wouldn't. So that tells me I need him to be the one to actually suggest they go visit. I don't think it would be too difficult to make that adjustment and make it believable, because the whole issue in book 4 is that his parents are planning to come for his graduation. He doesn't want them to come, but they're coming anyway. And Billy is just kind of like, is that really when I'm going to meet your parents for the first time? Like, that sounds like a bad idea. So I think if I change it so that it's Xander trying to preemptively make her feel better by being like, okay, well, my parents want me to come for Christmas. Why don't we go so you can meet them? And have it be his choice. I think that will work a lot better, but that still makes it so that she feels guilty for, like, making him feel like he has to do this, even though she didn't actually ask him to do it. So that keeps the tension that I want there without making her actually be the person to ask. Anyway, I am gonna deal with my hair and keep reading. I will probably finish this book today. I'm going to keep listening to my very, very depressing playlist and read. Okay, it is Sunday night. It's Mother's Day. I spent most of Mother's Day reading and watched a movie. I just kind of got to chill. My husband took the kids to play Pokemon. I finished book 2 right before the kids' bedtime. I cried quite a bit, actually, more than I expected to. It is just such a very emotional book for me. I mean, it's an emotional book, period, but it hits very hard, but it hits very differently than it did before. Now that I know more about autism and depression and all of that fun stuff. So book 2 is done. There were a few moments that I wrote down on my little thing here with the page number and what exactly the line is so that I can go back and reference it somewhere in book 4. Both of these moments, they're things that Xander says to Billy, and I think I really need in book 4 for those to be things that Billy says to him, because book 4 really is the first time that he is truly letting her in. He's letting her be the supportive one, when all the times before he has always been there to support her, but has never really given her the opportunity to reciprocate. This book has so many good Billy and Xander moments. And the next book is book 3. I love this book so much. This is when Billy and Xander actually get together and stay together, and then they get to kiss forever, and that makes me happy. But this book, so much of it, Billy and Xander are not really friends. Billy and Jimmy are also struggling to be friends for unrelated things that Billy is just not aware of. But she and Prue are really close now, and I love that. I love for her to have actual, like, healthy female relationships, because she's never really had a whole lot of those. I really love this book, but parts of it are going to be hard. That's just how this series goes, though. Like, parts of the book I just wrote are really, really tough to get through. And we'll see how that goes when I get to rereading that draft. Okay, I want to read this book now, but I don't know, maybe I should do something else first and at least sleep for a night before getting into the next book, maybe? We'll see. Okay, Monday morning. You know how I said I should wait until tomorrow to start book 3? Yeah, that didn't happen. I started last night. I wanted to get through at least the first plot point. I read like 117 pages after the kids were in bed last night. And, you know, reading them thoroughly. I was up way too late and I am very tired. And I should probably go back to bed. It's almost 9 now and I'm so close to the midpoint, which is kind of crazy. Man, all the stuff with Dahlia in this book is so much. So I'm like 180 pages in and Billy and Xander are finally like on decent terms again, which has been hard. It makes me sad. And he's just angry all the time, which is only somewhat related to her. It's more related to other stuff that she just doesn't know about, but he takes it out on her because he doesn't know how to handle what happened between them. And Billy has all of these little things that she like attributes to her depression that I'm like, that doesn't actually make all that much sense. Or it does, but in retrospect it's very obviously not the full picture. Like the minute it's winter break and she doesn't have a set schedule, she doesn't get more hours at her job, she has nothing to do over winter break except the little bit of work that she has, and that is all it takes to get her out of her routine, and she really struggles to like be in a good mental state while in that situation. She really just needs this routine. She thrives when she has a schedule, but the second that schedule is gone, all of her routines fall apart and she is just struggling to survive. And you know, that's the way I am. Like I did so well in school because the schedule was strict and I had so much outside accountability that I didn't have to do any of that on my own. And executive dysfunction only became an issue after I no longer had that set schedule. And yeah, that's exactly what Billy is going through. So unfortunately, she'll probably be struggling quite a bit with that after she graduates. I am really glad to be getting to the midpoint though, because so much much of Xander in the earlier part of this book really frustrates me. And like, obviously, I know better than anyone why he acts the way he does, but he's so angry with her and he takes out a lot of his frustrations on her, and it's not fair and it's not reasonable, and she is justifiably pissed at him. And frankly, if either of them needs therapy at this point, it's him. I will say my notes are getting so much messier, and I need to type all of these up and make this coherent again. But at this point, I'm almost halfway through book 3, so I've got like half a book left. I'll probably just wait until I finish that before typing everything up. Anyway, I am probably going to go lay down again and read some more and hopefully get a little more sleep, because I got like 4 hours of sleep, and that's not enough. It's really not enough. The problem with getting really obsessive about something like this is then you don't want to sleep, you don't want to eat, you don't want to do anything but the one thing, and yep, I just really want to get to the midpoint at this point, because that is probably my favorite part of the book. The midpoint's usually my favorite part of the book. Billy and Xander actually talk, like legitimately talk, for the first time in this whole book, and they really need to talk. Okay, I just finished what I thought was the third plot point, but I'm realizing now that wasn't actually the third plot point. It was supposed to be at some point in time, but in later drafts, it got changed, so it's actually not the third plot point anymore, and I'm only like 70% of the way through instead of like 75 to 80% of the way through. The first Billy and Xander spice scene is the third plot point, and so I have a couple more chapters to that. Anyway, I'm like 68% of the way through this book, apparently. I will be finishing reading this tonight. Like, I cannot imagine not getting to the point where they're together again. I need them to be together again. I need it to be okay again. I feel like my own books should not make me this emotional, and yet here we are. Anyway, I am cooking dinner right now. I've got the oven heating up, and I'm going to be reading while waiting for that to be ready to actually cook stuff. I will check in later tonight, probably after I've finished reading the book. No idea how good the audio on this will be because I don't have the mic connected, but I just finished the third plot point. I'm at the start of chapter 35. It's a very nice spicy scene, but then does not end well. Ah, they're so dumb. They're so dumb. Why did they do this to me? Yes, I realize that I wrote the book. I wrote, these are my characters and my story, but they're so dumb. I don't know what to do with them. They're stupid. I have 11 chapters left, like less than 100 pages, I'm pretty sure. That's not very much. I'm absolutely finishing this tonight. It's a little after 8. Yeah, we're gonna read. We're gonna read. It is 11:15ish. I finished reading book 3 like 15 minutes ago, maybe. I have a lot of feelings right now. I feel like since I wrote these books, they shouldn't affect me this much, but they do. I will say though, like, it's been years. Book 1's still my favorite. Is that weird? I don't know if that's weird. It took me like 6 days to read book 1. That was probably the one I was reading the most thoroughly. Also, I was making the most notes on because that's where the bulk of the descriptions and a lot of information that I wanted to make sure that I have needed to be written down. There was a lot of note-taking involved in that one, and decidedly less so in books 2 and 3, because for the most part I was using the same sort of words to describe their physical appearances. But there were a lot of things that I wrote down from books 2 and 3 as well. Little tidbits of information. A lot of off-campus locations came up, more so in books 2 and 3 than in book 1. In book 1, there were only like 3 off-campus places mentioned outside of Walmart. Billy and Xander definitely needed their own individual pages because these are like crammed full of information. And I left the back blank, but most of that's full for them too. Meanwhile, the backs of the other stuff for other people are where I added in other characters, like Jimmy's parents. I don't think I wrote down anything from book 3 that I want to make sure I reference in book 4. At least not anything that I haven't already referenced. There was one thing I wrote down that is, why does Xander hate his birthday and not want to celebrate it? The extent to which he does not want to celebrate his birthday in book 3 is a lot. More than you would expect based on what they know about his childhood at this point, which is not a lot. So that's definitely something that should come up. So yeah, these 2 pages are pages of stuff I want to make sure to either reference or include in book 4. I have a lot of notes to type up, and then the next step is this monstrosity. I have almost 400 pages of this to read, which to be fair is basically the same as all of these. But this will be a lot rougher. This is not nearly as well edited as those are. So I'm going to type up all of these notes, finish the map of campus that I've been drawing, maybe do a small map of downtown just with the pertinent places. And then after I have all of that set up and organized, it will be time to read the draft of book 4. Oh gosh, after reading all of these, I'm pretty anxious to read it. I want to read it, consecutively. So depending on how long it takes me to get my notes organized, I will probably start reading that tomorrow or the next day. I love these books so much. They are so heavy, so emotionally heavy. I have my live stream tomorrow, so I'll be doing Drabbles. And then I will probably dive into book 4 after that. It is whatever day it is, the 12th, the 13th? I think it's the 13th now. So I finished typing up all of my notes. I've got character descriptions, and somewhere in here it switches to location descriptions. And at the very bottom I have like a list of all of the streets that are mentioned. Most of these notes were taken from the first book or the first book where the character appears, because that is definitely where I put in the most description. And also in general, the descriptors that I use in later books are usually the same ones, so I only write down more when there are more options included. I also put in details like what type of car they drive, what their coffee order is, and then I put in a few other details, like at the end of book 3, it's mentioned that she did not want to walk for her high school graduation. So since they are now graduating at the end of book 4, that feels like information I probably want to remember. And in that same moment, you learn with Xander that he didn't walk. He did not attend his graduation. So a lot of descriptions, a lot of little details like that. A lot of this stuff will not be important to writing book 4, but if I do need it, then I have it here. I should probably also add to this anything that I make note of while reading what I have of book 4. So like this doesn't include any information about Xander's parents because at this point we've never met them. He's been on the phone with each of them in book 3. That is as close to being in the story as they are. And that's Billy overhearing one side of a conversation and not the side that gives her any legitimate information about them. I also made note of things like the school's mascot is a falcon, the colors are blue and gray, that is important. And then all of last night I was drawing maps and floor plans because I need this for my own stuff, and it's so frustrating when you find indiscrepancies in the text. Is very frustrating. So this is my general map of the city, but it's not even the whole city because there's more that way and that way. So like this is the downtown area. This is the bar that Xander works at. This is the house that they live in books 3 and 4. This is the coffee shop. This is where a house party is in book 1 that Billy has to walk to from campus to pick Xander and Jimmy up because they're too drunk to go anywhere. This is campus, so like this is the dormitory where they live freshman year, the art building, the auditorium, the library, and so on. This is her dad's house. That's one of the most important locations. This is the art gallery that she works at in book 3 until it closes. So I have most of the streets named. Like, it's kind of crazy that I don't have a name for this road. I also don't have a name for this road, which is fine. They don't all need names. And I at least have this now so that if I know I need that information, I can then come up with something fully confident that it doesn't... Boy, that was loud. Fully confident that it doesn't already have one. So many burbs. This is my zoomed in map of campus. This looks very similar to where I went to school because a lot of the locations are based on that. So like here are the dorm buildings. This is the cafeteria, the library, the main gen ed academic halls. This is like a campus cafe. The art building. This is the business building. This is like physical sciences. This is the big auditorium. This is all like upperclassmen housing. Frat row is there. This is more upperclassmen housing. And so's this. This is where Billy lives in book 2. This is where Xander and Jimmy live in book 2. And then in book 3, they live in the house off campus. This is Zane's apartment in book 1. And right over here is Brent and Darius's apartment in book 2. They are like very close to each other. So anytime Billy goes over to Brent and Darius's apartment, she walks right past Zane's apartment, which she was in like twice, but not good memories. Realistically, there are other campus buildings that did not make it onto this map. You know, probably somewhere I do have a rough map of campus that I did like 7-8 years ago, but I don't know where it is. I'm curious how close to that this map is, since I am, you know, retroactively putting this together. So then after that, this is a floor plan of her dad's house, the first floor, not the bedrooms upstairs. That's not really important. I know there are 3 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs, and the layout doesn't really matter aside from the room that Billy always stays in is right next to the stairs. So very simple. There's a front porch, 3 steps up onto the porch. He has a rocking chair and a peace lily. Then there's living room, mantle, chairs, couch, and coffee table. And there's also a record player that is behind the couch, kind of. I don't know if this setup is a great setup, but in my head, like, I know what that part looks like in my head. And then he has a study with like shelves of books, dining room that's specifically like 6 chairs. There's a little half bath, and there's a kitchen with an island, and then the back porch, which, I don't know, this is supposed to be a grill, and there's a bench swing. This is very much based on the house that I lived in during my sophomore year of college. So, and then this is the Sandalwood house. This is where Billy and Xander and Jimmy live during books 3 and 4. So this is the first floor and the second floor. Front porch, there's a foyer with stairs going up, and dining room is over here, living room is here, kitchen is there, and then there's a half bath there, which I forgot to label. Oh well. And then upstairs, the bathroom is right across from the staircase, and Jimmy's room is kind of catty corner to the bathroom. And then there's a storage room in that corner. The storage room is probably bigger than it should be on this floor plan, but it's fine. And then Billy and Xander's rooms are directly across from each other. And in the book, Billy's room is supposed to be the only one that has like balcony access. It's not like a legitimate balcony. It's like the top of the roof to the front porch, but it's kind of a balcony. Is basically she'd be climbing through her window. So in the book, her room is the only one that's supposed to have access to this balcony type area, but I could not figure out how to get the floor plan to work without Xander's room also technically having access to it. Her room being the only one to have access would make the interior not make any sense. So, I don't know, we're just rolling with it. And do the stairs line up on these floor plans? No, not at all. I don't know, dude. This is good enough that I can make it make sense in the text. It doesn't have to be perfect, and that's fine. These are for writing purposes only. They're not for like sharing with other people. It's really just for the sake of continuity. So those are the maps and floor plans that I spent most of last night working on. I went through 2 or 3 drafts of each of those. I think the main big map I went through like 5 different versions of before I finally got that one, and then still had to get a version that I didn't mess up in the inking phase. So the next step is this. This is my almost 400-page draft that I need to read and take notes on, figure out what all I still need to fix and change, and where I need to implement some of the information that I got from rereading all of my books. I am so excited and anxious to read this. I don't know how long it will take me. I do definitely anticipate crying, especially after rereading book 1. All of the stuff with her dad in book 1. I'm probably going to cry at some of the later scenes in here, the graduation scene specifically. I'm very excited to read this. I'm anxious, but that will be the next vlog. The bird is back. Thanks for coming along and listening to me ramble about my books, and I will see you guys in the next video.